What's up, everyone? Welcome back to my channel. I'm Janine Harris. We got a new little setup here, vibes. I hope you enjoy. And welcome back to another episode of Show and Tell. And we're here with Amelia Hall, a holistic, integrative, somatic therapist. I'm excited to pick your brain, and I'm really excited to share what I've learned from you with everyone because I am a trauma and somatics practitioner, but I'm not like a therapist like you are. So when I learned some of the somatic practices from you, it really it changed the game of working with that in my own practice. And I just really want to share, and I am excited for whatever it is you bring. Yeah. What's some of your story that you could share?
So as a young person, I myself was struggling with a sense of meaning and a sense of like, why is life this way? I was raised in a family that had pretty strict religious beliefs. And for myself, I was someone who I would say was somewhat of the black sheep of the family.
Okay.
The one that was like, hey, do we have to do things the way that things have always gone? Like, really just questioning. I've always been someone who is questioning, who asks why. And as a young person, really struggling with, why is my family member that I love so deeply sick, and how did they get here? So for me, it was really just a question of like, how do I deal with this? How do I make sense of the fact that someone I love so deeply is struggling? Yeah. Ultimately, I think my path for becoming a therapist was born out of my own desire for healing, for understanding my own family dynamics, and for basically wanting to be of service in a way that I know I can make a difference in someone else's life. Grief was something that I struggled with and dealt with for some time. You know, I like to say that grief isn't always about when someone dies. It can also be a grief of just the acceptance that someone is sick, or is not the way that is not as healthy as you would like them to be. And so this idea of grief, you know, we're talking about essentially life and death, and religion has a lot of answers for that. But I felt like for me, the religion I was raised in, Christianity, really didn't provide the answers that I was looking for. Like once I got old enough, I was like, what else is going on here? And began to seek my own answers. And so I always say, as a young person, like I was someone who was 12 years old, like Googling, or what was that at the time?
Like AOL Bing?
AOL Bing, exactly. Googling just like, okay, alternatives. What are like plant medicine alternatives? You know, my early research became looking at alternatives to disease, disorder that is outside of the medical model as we know it.
I am very grateful for the medical feats.
Yes, absolutely.
But there are just some things with health that I understand that.
Yeah, absolutely. We need both, right? We need not just understanding things from a medical lens, but also what else. How can we integrate like an East meets West perspective? Ultimately, that's what I studied in grad school was East meets West, transpersonal psychology, integrating spirit, mind-body spirit connection into psychotherapy.
So is that your title? You're a psychotherapist?
Yes, LMFT, licensed marriage and family therapist.
I noticed that your page says that you focus on highly sensitive people. So would you consider yourself a highly sensitive person? What made you focus on highly sensitive people?
Yeah, so I call myself a integrative somatic therapist. I offer EMDR, which is primarily a trauma therapy modality, and I specialize in working with highly sensitive people. So I would say ultimately that really specialization did ultimately come from my own experience as a highly sensitive person. Prior to acknowledging myself in this way, I struggled to understand why I felt things differently, why I was someone who always needed to dive in deeper to questions. I was always someone who like couldn't just be told this is what you need to do and just pay attention, like don't ask questions. I always had questions. And I wanted to know why. Like, why do we do the things that we do? And I think oftentimes religion can be very much like obey, pay attention, don't ask questions, follow commands. And for me, how being highly sensitive, I think, plays into that. Really just finding my own sense of freedom. Deconstructing is such a huge topic, right? And it's something that I think we all are dealing with in some level and capacity. But when you're deconstructing from a major religion, for example, it can be really hard because you're like, I'm not who you thought I was. I'm not who my family wanted me to be. And there might be guilt. There might be some kind of like exclusion going on there. But ultimately, I think that like when you have, 10 years down the line and you're actively working on yourself, it becomes easier.
I feel like I didn't know grief had so much to do with it until I was, getting deeper in the somatic work.
Yes.
And the Emdr therapy.
Yes.
Which I think was really helpful for me in therapy. Because talk therapy could get you so far.
Yes.
That was like the next step.
Yes, absolutely.
So I realized that whole thing of I'm not who you thought that I was, and I'm also not who I thought that I was, and I didn't really realize that was grief.
Oh, we're gonna just do this practice, we'll do this one thing, and that we're gonna be healed forever. And it's like the work is really in continuing to circle back to our fragmented parts, to our wounded parts, and to know that each time we do, it becomes easier.
And what does sacred mean to you?
For me, sacred really has to do with relationship, and relationship either with the divine, our higher power, relationships with each other, seeing the divine in one another. Not always easy to do, right? The pause. Sacredness to me really is about the space in between and being able to really feel into a certain timelessness. Like, to me, sacredness also has to do with the sense of like infinity, like, energy is not destroyed. What is that saying? It's like energy is neither created nor destroyed. Exactly. It's just like everything that ever was and ever exists is, and just the sense of like infinity connection. Like there's this certain timelessness to life.
In the pause.
In the pause. Yeah. Exactly. And accessing it, like being able to access it. I think that we talk about sacred and we think about like different practices, like what helps us access the sacred, whether it's like yoga, meditation. But when we really talk about the sacred, to me, it just is that essential timelessness that like, that we can sink into and relax.
I agree. Before I create this stuff, before I do any of my creative stuff, I have to pause. It like leaving space for, like some people say like leave room for God or whatever.
Yes.
Like, I mean,
exactly.
There's a lot of ideas that I want and that I'm constructing like with this whole set. But when you like pause, you're leaving space for like that part, the genius.
Yes.
Because I don't think we're the genius. It's more like the genius kind of goes through us. So I really resonate with that.
Yeah, it's like we're that channel. I love too that, that's kind of speaks to also like my general philosophy on healing too, is it's like I might be a guide, but I'm not the healer. Like clients are the ones that are doing their healing. I'm just kind of like the channel for that. Like I can help guide them there, but ultimately they're doing their own healing and work. It's not about who anyone is or any degrees or anything like that. It's just grounded. I think a lot of my work really is essentially client-centered, meaning I really try to get myself out of the way as much as possible. And essentially I like to say I'm rerouting my clients to their own wisdom. I'm always happy to give encouragement where needed, but ultimately it's often always about like how are you feeling about that versus what is the external wisdom outside myself that I need access to. It's more like, can we reroute you back to your own wisdom? I also feel really deeply that healing is something that we revisit almost just like on the spiral of life. It's like we're always going to come back to the sense of like triggers or woundedness, but we're going to have a different relationship with it. And so healing, I often like to say, is really about rewiring our relationship to the things that wound us and that have triggered us. It's not about changing what happened. It's about changing our relationship to what happened and the way that it lives through us. Because we can't change what happened, right? As much as we would love to. It's like, I can't change that X, Y, and Z happened, but I can change my thoughts around that. I can change my beliefs around that. And that's a lot of what EMDR works with, is the body, the way that we experience or have experienced trauma, and therefore our beliefs as well about ourselves due to experiencing trauma. And so we look at, the belief system, the body, and also the emotions that go along with it. We're kind of reprocessing all of that so that we can instead say, oh my gosh, I experienced this trauma. I'm such a fucking lunatic or whatever it is. And you're like, oh, actually I experienced this trauma. I'm a badass. I can give myself compassion for that, right? Versus being hard on oneself. Again, with that spiral, it's we're going to probably circle back to some of these negative thoughts about ourselves often, but can you find the pause? Can you find a way to catch yourself? Be mindful of it. Tune into what is actually the truth. And that is the healing. That is the healing, when we can tune back into what is left, when all of the chatter and all of the negative beliefs and stories about ourselves pause, and it all boils down to, that.
I like that it makes it feel like we have some sort of agency in our healing, because I think the fact that you said that you're not healing the person, that in a way you're helping guide them, and that they are doing that themselves.
Yeah.
That can be an issue I've had with spiritual teachers or some not so good therapists in the past.
Yeah.
I think that's the issue, is that you think that you need to get that healing from a specific person, and then it's almost like you're not able to have your own agency in your life and figure that out. I don't know if I'm verbalizing that properly.
No, absolutely. You're spot on. And my experience too, right? With, in general, sort of spiritual communities, and, I think you and I both have had our relationships deconstructing it, and it's still interesting to look back and be like, oh yeah, here's how I was putting so-and-so on a pedestal, giving my power away, and it's let's come back. Let's come back from that.
I feel like I'm so over feeling like a victim. Not that I don't know what you guys think of me, but I didn't necessarily feel like I have a victim complex or mentality. I feel like I really try to tackle my issues head on, but I did see that I over and over again in different ways, friendships, relationships, spiritual teachers, even if people don't mean to, I feel like I was so easily taken advantage of, because I would always be kind of in a position where, since I'm so curious, I want to learn, I want to know everything that people have to teach me. I was always trying to achieve something by being an apprentice. Groups where I would end up doing a lot of free labor and work for people.
Yes.
And not realizing it till I was already depleted.
Yes.
And just some people, it was partially my mentality, but some people are actually taking advantage. This kind of integrative work helped me be able to have a little bit more control over my own life. Of course, I feel as though we all go through steps to grow and learn as we grow up. So I do think a lot of those lessons were necessary, but after the somatic integration, I realized I'm really depleted, and I've let people kind of walk. I'm not trying to blame myself for everything. I do think there was malpractice a lot, but it's almost like I wasn't feeling what was going on, and then I was depleted, and as soon as I felt it, I was able to see oh my gosh, so much happened, and I was taken advantage of a lot, and that kind of triggered me, because I don't want to be a victim. So it's kind of but I was able to really piece things together, think about it, sit with it, and kind of take agency back.
Absolutely. No, that's so important. I think what you're highlighting is that when you pause, when you're engaged in a behavioral pattern and you actually take time to pause, you then have choice about, how do I want to move forward with this? And basically taking your own power back. I think, this whole conversation around victim mentality is really tricky, especially in today's world where women are blamed constantly for like, oh, what are you wearing? Like, therefore you attracted this abuse or whatever it is. It's such a fine line to walk. And, you reach a certain point of development, you can begin to understand, oh, wait, like, shit, I've been engaging in this pattern and I don't want to continue. Like, I can pull back my own energy here.
What do you normally, like, what are common things you notice with people with that? Because I do think it takes time, and you should take as much time as you need to figure it out. And it took me a while to not just feel like I'm an idiot.
Yeah.
Do you notice that with people? I've been wearing this bracelet from Tiffany's that I got from my godmother when I was a baby. And my whole life, I never wore it because I never felt good enough. I felt like it was too pretty. I looked it up. It was like $400 at the time of purchase, I think. I never felt good enough to wear it. I thought it was too pretty. I thought that so I never wore it my whole life, never. And then after what I learned from you, I was starting to wear it before, but I still didn't feel good enough to wear it when I had it out. And then there was just something that shifted. And so I stopped feeling self-conscious when people were complimenting it.
You deserve to feel beautiful.
Yeah, I was like always feeling like I had to like give an explanation like, oh, I didn't buy this recently. Like, I didn't spend all this money on it. Like, it was a gift when I was a kid. Like, and it's like, what's so wrong with me wearing something valuable?
Exactly.
The integration was integrating.
Yeah, interesting how those beliefs can come up even with what we choose to put on our bodies, right? I tend to think, and this probably goes back to my training as well, but when you say like one thing, victimization, we also are working with like the duality of victimization versus the complete opposite too. And so what I'm seeing a lot in with my clients is I'll have clients sometimes who have had severe sexual trauma, things that they never asked for, childhood traumas, that basically they are still carrying some of that energy with them. I think one of the most difficult things about that is that internalization of it is oh, well, this happened to me, therefore I called it in, therefore I deserved it, I attracted this to myself. There's this whole idea, like with the law of attraction, for instance, which, I think is useful in some circumstances, but I think as it refers to, for instance, sexual trauma, that's something that we have to be really, really careful about in our language.
You're creating your whole reality, so it's almost like anything bad that's happened to you is almost your fault.
Yes.
Yeah, I really, struggle with that. Can be something that comes up a lot in the spiritual community.
And while it's important to make meaning of things that have happened, I think it's also equally as important to say, like, yes, I learned from this, I survived this, and like I shouldn't have had to go through that. There is a certain level of like responsibility on the perpetrator, for instance, right?
Well, then what would you tell your younger self with the knowledge you have now?
Oh my gosh, if I could go back and tell like my early 20s self anything that I wanted to, let me sit with that for a second. I think I want to say that if I could speak to my younger self, I would tell her that it is equally as important to cultivate your own sense of communion with what's important, your own inner community, as opposed to seeking it always outward. I think I spent so much of my years in my 20s like wanting to build community, and I did, but I also think that what I would tell myself then is like, it's okay to be your own being. You don't need necessarily a group to belong to in order to make life worthwhile. My worth is not dependent upon me being connected to Christianity, for example, a Christian group, church practices, things like that. It's also equally not as connected to me being like, oh, I'm a devout yogi and I'm connected to this lineage and I have like, full focus on this one method. Also, it's kind of like my self-worth is not connected to me being like an LMFT and only doing this one modality, right? Like, I think there's a certain level of kind of like fundamentalist viewpoints that come in when we say, I need to be a part of a group in order to gain my self-worth. I think groups are amazing to have, especially when they're supportive and nurturing. But I also think that we spend a lot of time feeling like, oh, because I'm not connected or I'm excluded from this group, that means I don't have a self-worth. And that's really something I feel super strongly about, is like being able to rectify that.
I wanted to show you a clip, and that's what I'm bringing to show and tell.
Yeah.
So, trigger warning. What I'm showing is not graphic at all, but if you would like, I'm going to put a timestamp down below so you can just skip right past. But there was a show, I don't know if you've heard of it, called 13 Reasons Why. Have you heard of it?
I haven't.
You've never heard? Okay, so it's based on a book. I think the book came out in like the 80s or something, but it's like, have you heard of Degrassi?
Of course, yes.
So it's kind of like Degrassi 2.0. They made a show from the book. It's about a girl who commits suicide, and she leaves these tapes. It's very much like a story. She leaves tapes behind on why she did it for each of the teens, and it's it's kind of like a mystery. So there's a big theme of it that has to do with sexual assault. And so when I first watched the show, by the way, is very triggering. I would not watch it with the wrong people, and I would not watch it if you were not in a certain place.
Okay.
But in the show, there is a character in it, Bryce, who he's a rapist, and he does unspeakable things in season 1. In season 2, they try to redeem the character a little bit by getting it more into the subject of how we view people healing and changing. And I wanted to ask a therapist because a long time ago I reacted to this.
Okay. It's important to go slow and respect the body's boundaries. To go deeper, don't force. Good.
So right there, she says something interesting, which is, wait until your body gives you permission to go deeper. Don't force it. And I think there's something interesting here about, this idea of him being a perpetrator and, essentially forcing himself upon others. When you force yourself upon others, there's also this internal thing of, I'm forcing myself. And so it's interesting that he begins to break down once he relaxes, once he releases, once he stops holding himself up with a certain posturing. It definitely brings to mind how when we are enacting violence upon someone else, it reflects the inner world of how we can also enact violence upon ourselves, and kind of referring to the systems that we have lived in, or the way that we've been treated since childhood. For instance, I'd be really curious to know, like, where has this person felt victimized in his life to then need to make a victim out of someone else.
Shaking, does it hurt? Inhale, lift your torso. Oh, Bryce.
I don't know what's happening. I just started crying.
It's okay, it's good. It's okay.
I don't know why I can't stop.
It's really interesting to see a perpetrator have a sense of remorse and reflection on the thing that they did wrong. I think it's refreshing to see that in media. Unfortunately, in reality, oftentimes we don't really quite get that same response, and we don't really get that level of vulnerability and reflection from those that have hurt us. And it can be important to just recognize that the things that we see in the media, unfortunately, is not always what we will experience ourselves.
It's television, but what I did like was it was very similar. It was watching it just the way my high school was. it was very much like a reflection of what my high school experience was like, just a little exaggerated. And even like the characters and the friends and the way that a different character, not Hannah, with her sexual assault situation, it was the first time I'd seen on screen an example of someone who is not the perfect victim. I realized while I was watching it that with myself, the things that happened to me, I kind of had this deeply ingrained thing that there was something horribly wrong with me, and that because I was not like the perfect Christian, or not, that I was like an emotional teenager,
Sure.
that there was somewhere that like I deserved it. But watching that, it's like you see that what he was doing really didn't have anything to do with her. And just when we're talking about like the church and all these groups, and just how I was more focused on being okay with perpetrator, like, and forgiving them. Like, I wasn't just caught up in that mindset. I wasn't really seeing, like, I was kind of putting my focus in the wrong place.
Yeah.
And I like that you said the pause is sacred, because the pause was really important for me with my yoga journey. Because in the church, you can't meditate. You can't
give time for reflection, to think and question, is this how I want to operate? Yeah, I think that there's this verse around, like, if you're slapped, like, turn the other cheek.
Yeah.
Turn the other cheek, welcome it again, and then forgive, essentially. And it's like, there's certainly certain ways that it can set you up for being easily abused.
I guess I wanted to ask that whole question about forgiveness and all this stuff, because I want to see the world heal and I want to make a difference.
Yeah.
Thought that everything was going to look completely different than it did with healing.
Oh my gosh, say that again. Yes.
Yes, I thought it was all going to be completely different, and that I don't know what I think about whether or not we should forgive like that, like Bryce or perpetrators or whatever.
Yeah, sure.
But I've learned that like I don't have to be perfect, and I can have compassion for myself. It's complicated. Yeah.
Healing doesn't look like what you thought it would. That to me stands out. And I mean, I'll say that again. Healing doesn't look like what I thought it would look like.
Yeah. There it is.
Healing doesn't look like what we thought it would look like. And can that still be okay? Can it be okay if that doesn't necessarily mean that all of a sudden you want to be close with anyone that's harmed you?
Yeah.
Whew. Whew.
Working through it. Okay, what did you bring us for show and tell? I'm curious. I saw you had a bag over there.
Yes. So what we know, kind of tying this into the highly sensitive person again, is that we need breaks, we need rituals, we need pauses throughout the day in order to restore, to replenish. And so one thing that I will do after working with clients is find a way to cleanse myself, cleanse my energy. I love working with smoke, but sometimes it's not always feasible. So what I brought is a handy dandy spritz. This is rose water and peppermint spray. And once you are done, kind of complete with, say, the past hour working with someone, or you've just gone through a difficult time or transition, it's beautiful just to say, okay, cleansing my energy with my breath. I call in my own intention for purity, clarity, for being with all of the messiness of it all, and exhaling anything that does not serve.
Ooh, I need that right now.
Whew.
After that.
Here we go.
May I?
Here we
Do
go.
you mind?
Yes.
Okay.
Or want me to
I
do
don't
it for
know.
you? Okay.
Oh, sure.
There we go. There we go.
Oh, the rose is really nice.
Ooh.
I agree. Let's cleanse that.
Let's cleanse it.
I also
back.
work with that kind of stuff in my car, like after a doula client. What is that? That's rose and what?
Peppermint. There's a lot of conversation of like, sage, and you're burning sage or Palo Santo, and is that your lineage, and all of these things. And I think sometimes it's just helpful to be like, I'm just sticking with the essential oils in my rose water and call it a day.
I feel that. And did you want to do a meditation practice?
Sure, yeah. This is something that I do with my clients, and one of the ways that we resource is through finding an anchor with the mind, maybe going inward and just asking yourself, like, where have I felt a sense of peace and connection in my life. Maybe someone comes to mind, maybe it's a place in nature, or maybe it's somewhere that you are creating right now. But when you come to an image of either yourself in a relaxing place or sitting next to someone that you love dearly and that provides a sense of comfort for you, just sitting there for a moment and beginning to sense where you are, noticing what's around you, noticing the colors, asking yourself, what do you smell? What are the textures surrounding you? And we're just gonna do a quick exercise to integrate the sense of grounding, and this is with butterfly hands across your chest. You can notice a deep breath in and out. And then with this image, with this sense of groundedness, you can begin tapping left and right. And what this does is give you a bilateral stimulation, is what it's called. Basically, we are just recreating what the eyes do in REM sleep, which is process information. And we are focusing on that sense of grounding, that sense of feeling comfort in nature or with a loved one. For me, I like to imagine that I am in nature. Behind my first house that I ever lived in, there was a beautiful open space, and I'm just imagining myself there right now, noticing the green grass, imagining the sky above me, and maybe you welcome in an affirmation or intention. I feel supported, I am supported, I am grounded.
And sorry about that. The camera cut out during our lovely end of our meditation. Very, very helpful meditation that I think everybody can glean from. And all of Amelia's information is going to be linked below where you can find her and her socials. Thank you so much again, Amelia, for coming down to the show. And thank you everybody for watching another episode of Show and Tell. Like and subscribe for more content like this, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye.